the recording, and so that we can officially start this. So as I turn on the recording, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Stephanie Randazzo. Stephanie is a doctoral student in psychology at the American School of Professional Psychology. And what makes her extra special is that she also has Marfan syndrome. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box. I see somebody already has typed a question. And you can see that on the screen. Stephanie is going to leave plenty of time at the end and will answer as many questions as she can at that time. So the presentation is really scheduled for about a half an hour, and then the rest for questions so that all of you guys can have your questions answered. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the mouse over to Stephanie, and you should be ready to get going, Stephanie.
Great.
So, there you go.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in to the talk today. As I was mentioned before, it's the other half of you, mental health for beginners. And before I dive into everything, I just want to let you know that you may want your phone, tablet, or pen and paper by you. There is one section of the talk that I'll ask if you want to be engaged in and just kind of jot down a few notes, and if not, that's perfectly fine, but I'll also cue you when that time comes. So before we really dive into everything, I'm going to give you the outline for today, and it's what is mental health and how do we break the stigma around it? How do we recognize mental health, and what happens when we're ignoring those signs that are coming to the mind? How do we get in touch with our thoughts and feelings and really tap into what's going on? And slowing down the mind and body to truly connect the two and reframe our thoughts in a more positive way. So, first off, what is mental health? Well, it's an important aspect to our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It determines how we interact with people, how we're going to be coping with stressful scenarios, how we're making sense of situations in our everyday life, and what we're doing on a daily basis and how we're doing it. And one of the most important aspects to our psychological health is understanding that physical health is also intertwined. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if we start ignoring our psychological health, we can actually have negative consequences physically. And this can come in all different ways. Some of the most common are muscle soreness. So we may have a stiff neck, we may have back pain, or overall discomfort. Another area can start to be a weaker immune system. So we're actually having more colds because we're holding on to all of this internal stress psychologically that's physically affecting us. So when we raise awareness to these areas, we can actually increase our quality of life, which then improves our overall happiness. There is so many areas that can impact us psychologically, and I'm going to go over the three most common ones. First, it's biological. Is there any B12 deficiencies in the family, hyperthyroidism, any conditions that can be impacting us mentally? Then we have life experiences. How are we dealing with a chronic illness and also fulfilling a healthy lifestyle and one that's really meaningful to us? And the reason I say this is because chronic illness has shown to increase depression, anxiety, sorrow, weariness, nervousness, and overall fear. So it's really important that we tap into this. Then we have family history. Is there anyone in your family that may have anxiety or depression? And is there any chance that that can also be impacting you? And how do we become aware to live a fulfilling life? So, mental health has a huge stigma around it, and it's often seen as that taboo topic that many don't want to discuss. It can be for all different reasons from society, the fear of being different, concern of others not having empathy and being brushed off, or not wanting to see, quote unquote, like the crazy one. Some also may not believe in mental health. But regardless, it's really important to understand that this topic is difficult for most people to have. Some may feel shameful, nervous, and judged. Or they may even feel as if they're not allowed to be sad or angry. By keeping these emotions bottled inside, though, no one is winning, because eventually your physical health and psychological health start to negatively become impacted. And most people don't ignore physical health. So why are we ignoring mental health? Now, it is important to know that physical health, when it's treated, is usually not stigmatized. Of course, there are scenarios where people can face stigma and shame and judgment. But for example, if you break a bone, you're most likely going to go to the doctor and get a cast. And most people won't shame you for that. They'll actually encourage you to go and get a cast. But how are people reacting when we go see a therapist, a psychiatrist, or a counselor? And it's really important to just know that by promoting your well-being, it's part of breaking the stigma. Now, there's all different signs for mental health. And how do we recognize them, and how are they impacting us? Well, it's important to know that everyone does feel different emotions to a certain degree at some point in life, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes it's just a reaction to stress and exhaustion and can go away in a few days. Other times, the emotions last for a long time and can actually become troublesome because they're getting in the way of our daily life activities. One of the biggest challenges is being able to take a step back and asking for help during that difficult time. So now I said in the beginning that you might want your phone, tablet, paper, and pen, and I cue you in. These next few slides that I'm going over, I want you to just think how often you experience these, and if they ever get in the way of your daily life, or if you know anybody that experiences these, and how it's impacting them. Are you ever laying in bed at night and you're wondering when will you fall asleep? Or are you waking up periodically and you feel like you're ready to begin the day? Do you have a lack of happiness within your hobbies? Something that you did that used to bring you pleasure now just seems dull and you actually question the point of it. When you start a task, you find yourself constantly stopping, saying, I'll go back to it. And then you actually just don't because you have the motivation that is lost now. Your thoughts are always wandering. You can't stay on topic and you're forgetting a lot of information, even if somebody just told you that information. There's different events that are really troubling you in a painful memory. This can be in all different forms. Sometimes you have the visual of the memory. Sometimes you feel like you're physically having that reaction the same way you did during that time. Or even you're avoiding areas that could potentially remind you of that situation. You feel stuck in the thought and you're wondering how you're going to move forward, because in that moment you feel so trapped that you're not sure if there's other space. You have constant dreams of this memory. It's making you wake up in a panic, in fear, and you're just wondering when it's going to end. You feel nervous and distant from your body. Sometimes it's like your mind and body just aren't connecting. You're constantly worried, and this can come in all different ways as well. It can be with what if, or what will happen, or can I do that, or if I do that, will X, Y, and Z happen? Feeling as if you're on edge and you just can't sit still. There may be a concern behind it, or it just may be every little thing that's making you feel really nervous. You're trying to get control over your thoughts, but instead there's just one after another, and this can actually lead into fatigue and a flight of worries. The overwhelming sensation of emotions. You feel happy, you feel sad, you feel angry, and you're just not sure how to get a grasp on them. You're in the middle of enjoying yourself, and then you start to get a wave of sadness, and you just want to separate from everyone else. Instead of branching out, you're staying in your comfort zone. The thought of changes seems so terrifying to you that you can't move yourself forward. You have the desire to be around others, but then when you start to, you feel fatigued and drained, which is when you withdraw from them. So as I said before, it's important to tap into our minds and our bodies to see how often we're feeling this way. Are these thoughts and emotions impacting you on a daily basis? Are they stopping you from avoiding certain things that you used to love? It's all about knowing what's preventing you from moving forward. And sometimes that's not easy, and we need support and guidance. But what happens when we're ignoring these signs that are coming to us? Well, it can lead to a decrease in quality of life. We start to lose interest in continuing our passions. We question the meaning of life. Daily life activities are not being fulfilled, and an overall discomfort is being felt mentally and physically. We remain in a constant worry, which is actually telling our brain that we are in danger. This inhibits us from being able to relax and reflect on situations. We're constantly heightened and we're experiencing fatigue because our body just can't physically keep up. Even when we are doing activities that we enjoy, there's a part of happiness missing. The world around us just starts to seem dim and as if life is brighter for everybody but ourselves. Our concentration and dedication to everyday activities starts to diminish. We start to wonder, why are we doing this and how can we succeed still? Our future goals can start to suffer because we are constantly tired, emotional, and sometimes hopeless. We ignore our mental health and then our physical health starts to decline. Just the same way in the beginning that I mentioned, physical and psychological health are so strongly connected to the two. It's really important that we're tapping in, because we can experience muscle soreness, constant colds, and just a decrease in physical strength. The energy we have to continue trying new things and finding ways to help ourselves starts to dwindle. It's extremely important that we start tuning into our mind and our bodies during these difficult times. It may seem like life is not supposed to be about avoiding challenges, but the reality is that life is about learning how to work through challenges in a healthy way. So sometimes we may feel as if we are in constant motion of dodging a ball. Yet, if we are able to recognize this and slow our mind and body, we are taking the first step to creating a more fulfilling quality of life. So with that being said, it brings us into how to acknowledge these thoughts and emotions to improve mental health. First off, life may always seem as if it's going to be too busy or too stressful. Yet the key is to just take a moment and truly stop. Start to close your eyes and reflect on what is currently happening. Can you find where the emotions are coming from? Are they from something that just took place? Did you find out unexpected news? Are there memories that are coming to mind? Also, where are you feeling that emotion within your body? Sometimes when we get upset, we can feel it in our stomach, in our chest, and in our head. Really tap in to where you're feeling it physically as well. And then just take a moment and sit with the emotion. Instead of rushing through, try to breathe and stay with that feeling. Once you stay with that feeling, grab onto it and be able to label it. This will give you a sense of empowerment to learn where it's coming from and truly understand it. Then identify how you're phrasing it to yourself. What are the words that you're using to explain, this is my emotion, or this is how I'm feeling? Really tap into that. Why is this important? Well, the goal of this practice is to start slowing down and being able to identify the mental and physical responses you are having during stressful times. What are the areas that seem to be challenging and are often being avoided? How could we start facing them head on and improving our quality of life? Thoughts are not always going to be positive and cheerful, but that's okay. It is completely normal to have negative thoughts sometimes. What we really want to be careful of is how often are we having these thoughts and how is it impacting us on a daily basis. Allowing room for ourselves to start feeling compassion and self-love, knowing that there is space to not always be okay. So far, we have spoken about what is mental health and how do we break the stigma around it. We also went over different signs to be aware of and what could impact life on a daily basis if we ignore them. But this brings us back to the awareness and breaking the stigma. Sometimes the scariest part of mental health are the names around it, such as depression, anxiety, grief, stress, shame, and frustration. But really putting the name to it does not define us and it does not make us weak. Instead, it's allowing us to recognize what's going on and how can we move forward from there. And by saying that, this really brings us to the importance of language and why it matters so much. So language has the ability to really soak in what we are being told. And what I mean by that is what we tell ourselves matters, because if it's the one person that is always listening, it is ourselves. You may phrase a sentence in a way that can take a huge impact on your self-view and self-esteem. We may not always be able to think of kind language on the spot, but if we're able to be mindful of what we are telling ourselves, we can start to increase a more positive sense of self. It also brings a higher chance of gaining strength through that emotion and not staying stuck in the thought, really having that self-compassion. And why this is important is because an emotion is just a reaction to a verbal phrase and a situation. At the time, the emotion may make sense or it may not make sense, but there is always a deep-rooted thought under that emotion. And this thought brings us back to language and having the ultimate influence on how we are going to feel in the end when we move through that thought. So these two examples that I'm going to go over were actually provided by other individuals who grew up with Marfan syndrome. So since they were children, they have been living with Marfan. The first one is a negative thought. And it says, I wanted to be normal. I wanted everybody to think I could do what they could do. Going into a negative emotion, feeling isolated, feeling sort of different, feeling like you're being silently judged. What happens when we are feeling this way? And most importantly, how do we become mindful of our phrasing to decrease the negative habits from forming? Well, it brings us to reframing. I feel this emotion, but I can this action. We start to pay close attention to our feelings, our language, and actions. And by forming that habit, we're building empowerment through expression and action. The mind and body are becoming connected by recognizing these thoughts and emotions, which then provides the space to move through them. So let's put this into action. Starting with example 1. I wanted to be normal. I wanted everybody to think I could do what they could do. Here we are seeing language take control over the situation. The person is labeling themselves as not normal and wanting to control what others believe or thought. This puts us into the first step, reflecting on the situation. Then we move into the second stage, an alternative expression. I may be physically different, but I am still a person that can achieve my goals. Second alternative phrasing. I may not be able to do everything the same way others can, but there are things I can do that bring me joy. This brings us into the phase of connecting the mind and body and allowing space to move through the thought. Working through the second example, feeling isolated, feeling sort of different, feeling like you're being silently judged. Once again, we're finding that the emotion here is actually being activated by the language. And how can we reframe that for a more positive look? Well, sometimes I feel separated from others, but I can find strength through connecting with my loved ones. I may not be the same as others, but everyone is different. People may have opinions, and sometimes it can upset me, but I learn to realize the feeling and move forward. Now that we have gone over mental health, breaking stigma, the signs and ignoring, reframing and the process, it's time to touch on the importance of reframing and building a habit of mindful language. This gives us the ability to understand the emotion by tapping into what is happening for us. By being aware that not every thought or feeling has to be a positive one, giving ourselves space will bring guidance for acceptance and what is currently going on for us. Healthy habits have less of a chance of forming. So there's less of a chance of losing motivation, having a decrease of interest in goals, not taking part in activities, and instead you'll actually be able to recognize and reframe to create those healthy habits. So you'll keep your motivation, you'll have new interests and goals, and you'll take part in daily activities. Our psychological well-being has a chance to increase because we are acknowledging what is happening to ourselves. We're continuing to explore self-compassion and self-understanding. The mind and body are truly forming to connect together and increasing our quality of life. So just a quick recap on language. The one person that is constantly listening and is constantly with us is ourselves. The mind will believe what you tell it. So be kind to yourself and tell yourself positive phrases and language that allows for growth. It's even shown that positive language can have an increase in mood, self-esteem, and drive. Also, the reframing approach, it's not something that comes automatically to us. We actually have to practice it on a daily basis. So let's go over the steps one more time. Let's stop and acknowledge what is happening for us. Realize that something may be going on for you right now. Labeling the emotion and where is it coming from? Where in your body do you feel that emotion? Start to sit with the emotion and slow your mind and body down. Also, notice how you're phrasing the feeling and what it is bringing to your mind. Stay aware of what is happening and work on phrasing it in a more gentle way. Most of all, be patient with yourself. It is okay to still experience negative thoughts or emotions while doing this process. What we want to do is start off small and build from there to truly create a healthy habit. One kind phrase a day can be the stepping stone to reframing those negative thoughts and feelings. Lastly, it's never mentioned enough that support systems are so important to our mental health. Really connecting with others that make you feel heard and cared for. Knowing that you can trust the people you are going to and you do not have to worry about being judged can be such a weight lifted off of you. finding your sense of comfort for what you can tell others and what's truly helping you. It's giving you the space to explore yourself and to know that you do not always have to be okay. Strength comes in many different forms and in many different ways. Sometimes we just need somebody to support us or lend us a helping hand to work together until we're able to feel as if we're in a more settled space. Hey, that was a quick reframe and language importance and mental health. So now I will take questions.
So, hi, Stephanie, that was really great. And I'm gonna open up this question box here. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but let me let me go through these questions and let's see what we have for you. So, Laurel wants to know, is there any research or information about there being a degree of comorbidity between mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and Marfan syndrome?
So there is minimal research on mental health issues and Marfan syndrome. The research that has been done is very limited. And when I say very limited, I mean they're talking to about 5 people, and it's from 1998 or early 2000s. I actually myself have been doing research with Marfan syndrome and mental health. So that research is coming out. I've been working on it for 3 years with a professor at my university, and I'm really excited to keep branching out and providing education to other mental health providers and knowing the importance.
Great, and we will watch out for any research in this area too, so that we can share it with people. And let me just say, I want to apologize. I did not realize that part of the slideshow was cut off on the side, so I'll send a PDF of it out when we send out the link to the recording, and this way you guys have the actual PowerPoint too. So I just wanted to mention that. Grace wants to know, what is the difference between anxiety and depression?
Oh, that's a good question. So a lot of the time, anxiety and depression can overlap and look very similar. But what it comes down to is anxiety comes in all different shapes and forms, and so does depression. So example would be somebody who's feeling depressed often has a difficult time getting up in the morning or feeling that motivation to go out and get things done. They can have some difficulties with remembering information. They may just really stay to themselves, and you kind of see them change as a person because they're battling the depression. And then anxiety, I would say, kind of has a form of you're still going out, but it's also hard to calm your mind down. So there's a lot of worries going on, or you just feel like you can't stop talking because you're so worried. And then anxiety can also really mess up your sleep as well, though, which is why depression and anxiety sometimes go hand in hand together. So it's important to keep out an eye for both of those.
Okay, thank you. That really was a great question. Somebody else wants to know, how do we tell our parents and families that we think we might be depressed? That's a really good question. There's one thing to acknowledge it yourself, but then to ask for help and to let people around you know what's going on with you. How do you do that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And honestly, it comes in all different ways. Just knowing that you are experiencing a lot of emotions, and to then take that next step to ask for help. And as somebody who has gone through depression myself and anxiety, I know it can be extremely challenging to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. But the best advice is to know that you do have these support systems, and the way to achieving a healthier life is reaching out to them and just letting them know what you're experiencing.
I would think you might want to, pick the one person who you think might be that you can trust the most, and then start there. And then I guess it might get easier once you get the support from that person,
Yeah, and it really depends exactly what they're looking for, though. For therapy, sometimes it's best to reach out to our parents or our loved ones that can help us look for therapy. And a therapist is a doctor. So even though there's a lot of stigma around it, it is going to a doctor, and just you're taking care of yourself mentally the same way you would do physically.
That's really great. That's really great advice and a great way to look at it, because it's really true. Kind of opposite kind of question. If your friend or family member tells you that they're depressed, what do you say to them? How do you help them?
Yeah. So if somebody's telling you that they're depressed, it can be really challenging because there is no right thing to say to somebody when it comes to depression. They're going through this battle, and the most that you can do is really provide the support and let them know that you're there to listen, that you're there if they need to cry, or you're there when they want to go out, and that you're by their side. And I think the most important phrase to tell them is to say, hey, you're not in this alone. I'm by your side, and we can get through it together.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Andy wants to know, and I'm sure other people here would like to know too, are there any books or even, I guess, websites or blogs or other resources that you would recommend to our listeners tonight if they want more information on this, more tips, more insights?
Yeah, so I don't have any off the top of my memory, but I could definitely get you a list that you could send out to them.
Okay.
I think that would be
great idea.
Way. There's a bunch of great self-help books for kind of reframing your thoughts and how to motivate you to be kinder to yourself.
That's really a good way of thinking about it, being kinder to yourself, because sometimes you say things to yourself you would never say to somebody else. So it's a good way of thinking of it. And we will get a list of resources from you to share with everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
So what is it typically like to go to a therapist? Somebody wants to know. If you've never been before and you're listening to this webinar, it sounds like obviously it's a good way to be kind to yourself to get some help. But what is that experience like? What happens the first time you go, and then what do subsequent visits look like, or what do you do there?
Yeah.
Do you actually lay on a couch? Do you actually lay on a couch like you see on TV?
So I love that question. It depends on the therapist's office. Most of us have couches, and you can lay on the couch if you please. But I know for a lot of people, it can seem kind of scary to just make that step and go to a therapist, because it is, what are we going to be doing there? And the first meeting is really just getting to know each other. And when I say getting to know each other is because a therapist is somebody that you're working with so closely. You're telling them secrets or thoughts that you most likely haven't told anybody else. So don't be scared to ask them questions. Make sure that you can work with that person. I always recommend it that kind of finding a therapist is like finding a good pair of shoes. you're going to try on a couple to make sure they really fit and that you're a good fit for that pair of shoes. So the same way is just you go to a few therapists, you see who you feel that you can work with, and you know typically within the second to third session. And a little bit about what you do is it's different for every therapist. There's all different techniques out there, but it is a standard 50-minute session. And some therapists, you will talk and they'll talk back with you, very active. Some therapists will give you different homework assignments, like improving positive self-thoughts. So this week, I want you to think of 2 positive things about yourself and then keep building on it with the therapist as you continue to see them weekly.
That sounds great. That really helps people know what to expect. Oh, Jim is here. Hi, Jim. How are you? He's got a question. He said, these are mostly self-remedies. Like your example with the broken bone, at what point should one seek further help with a trained professional? Great question. You know, people are going to try some of these things that you said, and how do they know, you know, when they should be like, you know what, I need other help?
Right. Well, as I'm not sure if he was there for the part about knowing the signs and what happens when you ignore them. And if you're at the point where you're questioning if you should seek further help, you most likely should seek further help, because it usually means that it's impacting you on a daily basis. And when it impacts you on a daily basis, there's all parts of your life that start to kind of slip through the cracks. And to really have that fulfilling life, it's working with somebody and being able to gain that just mental energy to continue on and feel healthier physically and psychologically.
Great, thank you for that. Laura wants to know, is there an app or tool guide worksheet available to step through the reframing process? And if there is something that you recommend, that we can certainly include on a list of resources that we'll follow up with everybody with. But is there anything that you know of?
So there are a few apps, but that would definitely be something that I could send you as well, just to go through them. I know there's a few, if you type into Google reframing, but to really get you the best ones, I could send you a list.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're gonna call you on that one tomorrow. Jim wants to know if you've seen any PTSD or Damocles syndrome amongst Marfan patients. Whether it's professionally or personally.
Yeah, PTSD and was it
Damocles syndrome? Yes, PTSD or Damocles syndrome.
No, so I've seen PTSD with Marfan syndrome, but I'm not sure of the second one.
Okay. Okay, so Laura was also looking for resources or tools, and we're definitely going to follow up with that. Here, Allison says, I feel like I'm constantly reporting to my support system that I am tired or achy and afraid to really let others know the truth about how I feel, because it's always the same, and I'm sure it gets exhausting for them to hear. I feel like I need them to know that I'm just exhausted and hurting, but it sucks being that person. So do you answer people truthfully? Do you, even if it's your support system, do you think they get tired of hearing from you, or does this mean you should, you know, seek professional help? Like, what do you think, Stephanie, about a situation like this?
I mean, while I highly recommend support systems, the big thing that some people don't realize about therapists is they're more than your friend, and they're more than a support system, because they're somebody that is going to be constantly listening to you in a different mindset. So they're going to be working alongside to understand what's going on and just have this unbiased opinion, because while support systems are great, sometimes we need both. and being able to have the support system and a therapist is really just building on to working through whatever challenges you're going through.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. Here's another question from Allison, very specific. Any suggestions for working through the fear of death and dying related to Marfan and aortic dissection? Despite being monitored by a doctor, every chest twinge or pain can cause a panic attack. I mean, that's a real thing, you know. How does all of this, what you taught us tonight, how can that help when you have this particular fear?
Yeah, so when it comes to death and dying, I believe that's another talk, because that's a fear outside of being kind to yourself. That's tapping into the reality of living with Marfan syndrome or with a chronic illness, that we face challenges that the normal individual does not face on a daily basis. And by having a therapist there, you're working through that fear. So my recommendation for the fear and thought of dying when you're going to these medical appointments, especially if you're feeling panic at them, would be to see a professional and to be able to work through that and gain an understanding of how to cope when you go to the doctors and how to move forward in life with that thought, but not letting that thought hold you back.
Sounds like it's easier said than done. So
Yeah,
I think it's a really...
Of course, all of this is easier said than done. None of this comes overnight, and none of it comes within a week or within a month. All of these self techniques, all of the help from a therapist, they come over time. I'm somebody that was diagnosed with Marfan since birth, and I've been seeing a therapist for 5 years in a row now. So it does take time and it takes patience, but you still see little achievements along the way.
So you keep practicing these techniques, and then, you know, at some point they become the way you think.
Yeah.
But I think this question from Allison is really important, and I think that's something that we should either address like in a blog post or in another webinar, because this is real, and this is something that, you know, again, we want to help people deal with these kinds of feelings.
Right. Well, that's why I was saying it's beyond this talk.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
Serves its own category, because it is a real situation that
absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you can relieve symptoms of depression? Do you feel like you can relieve symptoms of depression or anxiety naturally? Do you need medications, or sometimes can you do it without medications?
So the best tool usually that we start with for depression and anxiety is getting outside, being in the sun, being as active as possible, and that could mean going for a walk or just kind of getting your body moving a little. And then usually the next step is, if it feels that it's not getting better and you're still really struggling, would be to see a therapist. And then from there, you and the therapist would discuss the option of seeing a psychiatrist for medication if that's needed. It's not always needed. It's a very individual case by case, the same way Marfan's is different for every individual. Mental health is different for every individual.
Great points, great points. Here's another really good question. You know, with Marfan syndrome, it affects many people in the same family, and Allison is asking about your ideas about dealing with intergenerational trauma around Marfan. So maybe you're not the only one in your family dealing with this, and everybody's got their situations and dealing with mental health based on their own Marfan syndrome or as caregiver. So how is this compounded then within the family unit when there's multiple people affected?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in the family, when there's multiple people affected by Marfan syndrome, or when there's just caregivers who are also going through that very difficult time with the other individual, there's so much trauma that can be impacted into the family system. And then that's also something that takes a lot of dissecting to see how you can all work together and where do you go from there. So these questions are great, but there's no one quick answer. It's an answer that comes with time and work in different areas.
Okay.
Really frustrating.
All right, good. Regarding professional help, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, where do you start? And is there a primary care doctor necessary to monitor your medications?
Yeah, so that is a great question because some people just don't know where to start, which can be super frustrating. And psychologytoday.com is a great website to look for therapists. You can put in your insurance, or you can put in your location, or if you want to see a male or female. And you can also call your insurance company and tell them that you're looking for a therapist or a psychiatrist, and they will give you referrals. There's also sliding scale clinics within each state. I only know California and the northern area, so it depends on the state that the person's living in that they could find as well if they don't have insurance. And then regards to medication, typically it's ideal if the person is seen by a psychiatrist, because that is their domain and it's their understanding. So they'll be followed by that psychiatrist instead of a primary care doctor.
All right, thanks for explaining that. All right, so Allison would like part 2 to this. So I think, you know, Allison, and for anybody else who's interested in this area, a lot of the webinars that we're doing in this empowerment series are related to mental health, mindfulness, different ways of looking at it. It might not be called, you know, mental health for beginners part 2, but, you know, sign on for the next one, and you'll see that it's not a continuation, but it complements what we're talking about tonight. Another question, and then we have a few in the chat box. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Does depression and or anxiety ever go away, or do you just get used to it?
So the one phrase that I like for depression and anxiety is that it's like a heartbeat. Sometimes it's very steady and you're being able to continue on without really being impacted by it on a daily basis. But then sometimes it may spike up and you're noticing it again. But then you go back to more of a normal flow, for lack of a better term. And it's not that does it go away or do you ever get used to it? It's how do you work through it, and to what case for that individual is it impacting them, and how do we create the best quality of life for that person?
Great, thank you for that explanation. All right, so now in the chat box, we have a couple more questions here. Wow, I don't think we're gonna get to all of these, but let's try. So there's a question here about sleep and diet. I think that's for another webinar, because those are big areas unto themselves. So we will keep that in mind, Ashley. Let's see. Somebody's saying, talk to people that you trust. If your family member picks on you anyway, avoid that person. I think everybody does see these chats, so I don't need to repeat those. Let's see if there's any more questions in here. I don't, I don't think so. I think we're good. Everybody's, you know, really supportive, you know, very good reminder about the strength of the mind-body connection. Sometimes family is in denial. There's a lot of stuff going on in families. And so I think all this information that you gave us tonight was really useful, Stephanie, so that people can start to deal with it themselves and deal with, you know, lean on their support system, go to professionals, and really some great information. I really want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
So let's
yeah.
oops. So let's, you guys all still there? Uh-oh. Are you still there? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, there's the end of the slideshow. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry guys. So here we go. So I just want to thank Stephanie for sharing all this great information with us tonight. And please, you should all know that there's a lot of information at marfan.org. A lot of the content related to mental health, mindfulness, that is on the Marfan blog, which is on our website. We have a nurse in our help center, Jan Lynch, and she is also available to you to answer questions. And if she doesn't have the answer, she will get the answer for you through our professional advisory board, through our resources like our experts like Stephanie here. And Jan's contact information is there, jlynch@marfan.org, and there's her phone number. Our next webinar is on June 21st, and the title is Empowerment and Finding Your Passion. I think I lost everybody. I am not sure if you're still there. Andy Erickson will be on with Katie Lasky, and you can register on our website. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Great.
Good night. Good night.